Being a woman in the public eye has never been easy. Female celebrities have always faced more scrutiny than their male counterparts in every possible way. And that was no different in old Hollywood. Back then, studios felt they owned their female actors' personal lives, bodies, and minds. From forced abortions to being institutionalized, being a famous woman was a dangerous profession. From Lana Turner to Judy Garland, here are 11 women who went through hell in old Hollywood. In February 1940, 19-year-old Lana Turner, already a budding actress for MGM, garnered the media's full attention when she eloped with 28-year-old bandleader Artie Shaw after their first date. However, the highly publicized relationship only lasted for a few months before the famous pair divorced on the grounds of mental cruelty. Shortly after the divorce, however, Turner discovered she was pregnant, which posed quite a problem for MGM. Back then, most film studios demanded that female stars who had gotten pregnant either have an abortion or give up their careers in order to maintain either their sex appeal or, in some cases, virginal, childlike image. Due to these rules, Turner was forced to undergo an illegal abortion in Hawaii. So the media wouldn't become suspicious, Howard Strickling, MGM's head of publicity, arranged for Turner to visit Hawaii as part of a promo tour. Upon arrival, she was forced to endure an unmedicated abortion in her hotel room while her mother held her mouth to muffle her screams from the rest of the hotel. The procedure cost $500, which was then deducted from Turner's paycheck. A mere week later, she was back on set to film Ziegfeld Girls alongside Hedy Lamarr and Judy Garland. Contemporary reports claimed the star had been hospitalized due to exhaustion. Clara Bow was the it girl of the 1920s. Known for her baby-faced looks and dazzling personality, Bow was on top of the world during the flapper decade, even starring in Wings, the first movie to ever win Best Picture at the Oscars. She was also one of the few actors who successfully transitioned from silent films to talkies, and it seemed as though even the Great Depression wasn't enough to stop her rise to the top. However, off-screen, Bow had developed a reputation for being unconventional, which, as you can imagine, earned Hollywood's disapproval. Some of her escapades included engaging in numerous affairs, wearing bathing suits to formal dinners, and painting her body. Tabloids soon got word of Bow's party behavior. They began a smear campaign, which unfortunately coincided with ongoing battles in Bow's personal life. During this time, she was actually sued for stealing a woman's husband. Film producer B.P. Schulberg began referring to the star as Crisis a Day Clara. In 1931, the mounting pressures of Hollywood, the watchful and judgmental eyes of the media, and the aforementioned legal trouble caused Bow to suffer a nervous breakdown at the age of 28. She voluntarily went to a sanitarium to recover. Upon her release, she left Hollywood for Nevada, where she married actor-turned-politician Rex Ball. This, however, wasn't the end of Bow's acting career. She starred in 2 more films before officially retiring in 1933. However, being out of the public eye didn't prove to be the end of Bow's mental health crisis. In 1949, she agreed to undergo shock therapy after a suicide attempt 5 years prior. It was during this time that she was diagnosed with schizophrenia, which her mother also had. In February 1922, Bow's mother, Sarah, had tried to kill the actor and was committed to a sanitarium until her death from epilepsy the following year. Analysts later tied Bow's own schizophrenia diagnosis to her mother's attempt on her life. Bow lived in obscurity for the rest of her life and became a recluse after her husband's death in 1962. Greta Garbo. Before she was even on the silver screen, Garbo was pressured to lose weight. At the age of 17, the actor finally secured an audition for the Dramatic Theater Academy after spending the previous 3 years working as a shop girl. At the state-sponsored acting academy, Garbo met one of her first mentors, director Moritz Stiller. He immediately advised the up-and-coming actor to change her last name from Gustafsson to Garbo and lose 20 pounds. The director then cast his new leading lady in The Saga of Gösta Berling, a smash hit film in both Sweden and Germany that caught the eye of MGM's Louis B. Mayer. Mayer and Stiller arranged to meet in Germany, and although the MGM co-founder was there because of his interest in Stiller, Garbo was the one who drew his attention. Mayer invited the actor-director duo to America, but not before whispering a word of warning about Garbo's career in Stiller's ear. In America, We don't like fat women. Not wanting to miss out on her chance at stardom, Garbo embarked on a highly dangerous crash diet where she ate nothing other than spinach for 3 entire weeks. During this period, she became incredibly ill due to her rapid weight loss. However, the pounds she dropped proved to be muscle mass that she was unable to regain. Lorette Young, before passing away from ovarian cancer in August 2000, Young publicly confirmed a long-standing Hollywood rumor in her memoir, Forever Young, the life, loves, and enduring faith of a Hollywood legend, that the daughter she adopted in 1936 was none other than the result of a sexual encounter with fellow film icon Clark Gable. Young, a devout Catholic, refused to reveal her pregnancy to 20th Century Pictures, as she knew they would likely force her to either quit her career or have an abortion, which her faith considered a mortal sin. Alongside her mother and sisters, she devised a scheme to disappear from Hollywood for a short while, have the baby in secret, and pretend to adopt her own child later. When her pregnancy became noticeable, Young vacationed in England for several months before returning to California to give birth. Upon her arrival in Tinseltown, the actor was interviewed from her bed while staying carefully concealed under blankets, claiming that her recent lack of film appearances was due to a relapse in a condition she had suffered from since childhood. Several weeks later, on November 6, 1935, Young and Gable's daughter Judith was born, aptly named for Saint Jude, the patron saint of difficult situations. A few weeks after birth, Young placed her newborn daughter in an orphanage so she could later adopt her. In 2001, Judith, who took the last name Lewis after her mother married producer and writer Tom Lewis, told the New York Post that at the time of her adoption, her mother publicly claimed to be in the process of adopting 2 daughters from a Catholic orphanage, but later told the press that one of the adoptions fell through, resulting in Judith being her only adopted daughter. Lewis stated, "It was a small smokescreen. She figured if she had wanted to adopt 2 babies, nobody would think that they were her children." Despite it being an open secret in Hollywood, Lewis wasn't aware of her true parentage until she was 31 years old. When asked about the experience of learning her adopted mother was her biological mother, she admitted, "I guess it was about 2 weeks before I was to be married. I said to my future husband, 'I can't marry you. I don't know who I am.' He said, 'Don't worry about it. I know everything about you. You're Clark Gable's daughter.'" That's the first time I had heard that. Everybody else had. I grew up with movie children, and they all knew the story. Nobody ever told me. She then confronted her mother with the rumor, and Young confirmed it was true. "I had been in therapy for 2 years, and I was ready to find out the truth about my background," she related. "I was working in a soap opera, and I took 2 days off to fly to LA. Mom picked me up at the airport, and it took about 12 hours to say to her, 'Is my father Clark Gable?' She said yes, and then we spent the whole night as she told me everything, how it happened, where she was, how frightened she was, how she hid me, and the knowledge of me from everybody except her family." In 2015, Young's daughter-in-law, Linda Lewis, who was married to Young's son Christopher, stated that in 1998, the actor privately revealed that Gable had raped her when she conceived Judith. Young had realized this sexual encounter was date rape after watching a segment about the topic on Larry King Live. The family kept Young's secret until both she and Judith had passed away. Rita Hayworth, born Margarita Cancino, to a Spanish father and Irish mother, Hayworth underwent a complete transformation that eliminated most traces of her Spanish ethnicity upon her introduction to Tinseltown. First discovered by a Fox film producer while dancing in a Mexican nightclub, Hayworth later signed a contract with Columbia Pictures for a 7-year deal. However, studio head Harry Cohn believed the actor was being typecast as exotic in the small parts she was first offered due to the fact that her image was too Mediterranean. Upon hearing this, Hayworth's promoter and later husband, Edward C. Judson, decided to heed Cohn's criticism. He then persuaded Rita Cancino to adopt her Irish mother's birth name, Hayworth, which the studio believed emphasized the actor's Irish-American ancestry, therefore portraying her as an all-American woman to fans. However, the actor's all-American, aka whitewashed transformation, far exceeded a name change. She also underwent electrolysis to change her naturally low hairline and began dyeing her hair red to distance herself from her naturally dark hair color. Author Priscilla Peña noted that Hayworth's true heritage was still mixed into her on-screen talents, when it was beneficial for sex appeal. As a Cancino, Rita found that dance was an expected and compulsory part of her racialization as an ethnic dancer or cantina girl in Hollywood. As Hayworth dance primarily functioned as a measure and limit of her characterization. When Rita was paired with Fred Astaire in You'll Never Get Rich, her sensual dance style was reborn as a talent unexpected from an all-American girl. Lauren Bacall. Besides changing her last name, Bacall, who was born Betty Joan Persky, was made to undergo strenuous voice lessons to develop her trademark sultry sound. After appearing on the Harper's Bazaar March 1943 cover, Bacall was discovered by famed producer and director Howard Hawks' wife, Slim Keith, who insisted her husband invite the then model to screen test for his newest film, To Have and Have Not. However, Hawks' secretary misunderstood the screen test invitation and sent Bacall a ticket to Hollywood for the actual audition. Upon meeting the then teenage Bacall, Hawks immediately signed her to a 7-year contract and began managing her film career. However, the Slim took Bacall under her wing in all other manners, including style, taste, and of course, the way she spoke. As difficult as it may be to believe, Bacall had a naturally high-pitched, nasally voice deemed unfashionable for stars, especially female actors of the day. Therefore, at both Slim and Hawks' urging, the actor enrolled in grueling vocal lessons, requiring her to shout Shakespeare verses for hours daily. In her 1979 memoir, By Myself, Bacall recalled how she would also read novels in a lower register to achieve the perfect sound. Howard Hawks, wanted me to drive into the hills, find some quiet spot, and read aloud. He felt it most important to keep the voice in a low register. Mine started off low, but what Howard didn't like and explained to me was, if you notice, Betty, when a woman gets excited or emotional, she tends to raise her voice. Now, there is nothing more unattractive than screeching. I want you to train your voice in such a way that even if you have a scene like that, your voice will remain low. I found a spot on Mulholland Drive and proceeded to read the robe aloud, keeping my voice lower and louder than normal. If anyone had ever passed by, they would have found me a candidate for the asylum. Who sat on mountaintops in cars reading books aloud to the canyons? However, the lessons worked, leading critics to deem her voice as a smoky, sexual growl and a throaty purr. Later, a medical condition known as Bogart-Bacall syndrome was named after the actor and her first husband, fellow Hollywood icon Humphrey Bogart. The condition affects those who speak in a lower than normal register for extended periods of time. Katharine Hepburn. Throughout history, and still today in many parts of the world, women wearing pants was a major taboo, and if a woman happened to be in the public eye, it created an uproar. Such was the case of Katharine Hepburn. But as the 4-time Oscar winner proudly proclaimed to Barbara Walters in 1981, I put on pants 50 years ago and declared a sort of middle road. Hepburn had enjoyed wearing more masculine clothing since she was a child. At the age of 9, the actor had someone shave her head and immediately ran to put on her older brother's clothes. She later told biographer Charlotte Chandler, "I had a phase as a child when I wished I was a boy because I thought boys had all the fun. I did wish I could be a boy, so I decided I wanted people to call me Jimmy. I just liked the name Jimmy. I told my family I wanted to be called Jimmy." Once Hepburn made it to Hollywood, she eschewed the prevalent damsel in distress film stereotypes and refused to conform to society's attitudes towards what a woman could and couldn't be, which led some critics to call her too masculine and too rough. However, Hepburn was revolutionary, not only in her acting approach but also in her fashion sense. By 1933, the actor became so synonymous with women wearing pants that she was featured in an issue of Movie Classic magazine alongside fellow silver screen queens Greta Garbo and Marlene Dietrich as among the stars who have lined up on the side of trousers for women. But as with any time a woman does literally anything, people couldn't let Hepburn happily wear pants. While working at RKO, the actor often wore blue jeans to the studio until one day, when she returned to her dressing room to discover that her jeans had been confiscated in an effort to force her into a more feminine style. However, she refused to cower to the higher-ups by donning a skirt and instead chose to walk around set in her underwear. As one can guess, her jeans were promptly returned. Despite her reputation as gasp, all right, an unconventional woman, Hepburn's choices ultimately didn't affect her career, but rather turned her into the patron saint of the independent American female, as Mary McNamara wrote in the actor's 2003 obituary. Frances Farmer. When Frances Farmer hit the silver screen, she was poised to be the next big thing. Even contemporary gossip columnist Luella Parsons claimed Farmer would become bigger than Garbo. However, things would quickly change for the newly minted star. Farmer, who had long been a nonconformist, refused to alter anything about herself, including her name when she came to Tinseltown. Despite her fiery reputation, Farmer still earned the public's adoration after a dazzling dual portrayal of mother and daughter in the film Come and Get It. Due to the film's success, she was offered numerous roles. However, she refused to take them because she felt they were too vapid. Bored with the silver screen, Farmer decided to try her hand at a career on the stage. Despite securing a major role in Clifford Odets' play G. Oldenboy, Farmer's stage career proved to be unsuccessful. It didn't help matters that at this same time, she was also facing legal troubles, a tumultuous marriage, and a growing dependence on both alcohol and amphetamines. This stress culminated in a fateful late-night drive in October 1942, which would prove to be the beginning of the end for the actor. On the night of October 19, 1942, Farmer was stopped by a police officer for driving with her headlights on during a wartime blackout. She told the cop, "You bore me," and reportedly used several other colorful descriptions. Despite her rowdy behavior, Farmer was only charged with drunken driving and given a suspended sentence. The trouble didn't end there, though. Several months later, she was charged with assaulting a studio hairdresser who claimed Farmer had hit her and dislocated her jaw in the process. The actor was sentenced to 180 days in jail. However, her sister and a Los Angeles County deputy worked to have her sentenced to the psychiatric ward of Los Angeles General Hospital rather than prison. Their plan worked, and Farmer was transferred to the psychiatric ward, where she was diagnosed with manic depressive psychosis. With the assistance of the Screen Actors Guild, she was moved to another facility known as the Kimball Sanitarium to receive different treatments. Psychiatrists there diagnosed the star with paranoid schizophrenia and experimented on her with insulin shock therapy, which was used to subdue patients by putting them in a comatose state. After these treatments failed to improve Farmer's condition, she was transferred to yet another facility, the Violent Ward of Western Washington State Hospital. The Western Washington State Hospital Psychiatric Ward was hell on earth. In addition to the sadistic medical procedures and treatments patients endured, they were also raped by fellow patients, orderlies, and even GIs from a nearby Army base. Despite the circumstances, Farmer survived and moved to Indianapolis, where she lived in relative obscurity for the rest of her life. Dorothy Dandridge, soon after her first starring role in 1953's Bright Road, alongside singer and actor Harry Belafonte, Dandridge enthusiastically auditioned for the role of the title character in the upcoming musical Carmen Jones, despite director Otto Preminger's insistence that she wasn't right for it. Soon, however, the actor had captured the role, an Oscar, and Preminger's heart despite his marriage. The affair between the actor and director lasted for 4 years and ultimately culminated in Dandridge becoming pregnant with Preminger's child. However, she was forced into obtaining an abortion by Fox executives who wanted the star to maintain her status as a sex symbol. Another factor in the studio's insistence on abortion was not only that Preminger was married, but also that he was white. Although California's anti-miscegenation laws had been repealed several years prior, the studio worried about the public's perception of an interracial romance, therefore forcing Dandridge to undergo an abortion if she wanted to keep her career. Dandridge acquiesced and took a 2-year hiatus from the silver screen before returning with some of her most groundbreaking work, which often depicted interracial romances, such as Island in the Sun and an Italian film Tamango, which wasn't released in America until 1959 due to its controversial nature. Lena Horne. In the late 1940s, Horn met and fell in love with bandleader Lenny Hayton. The pair decided to marry in December 1947. However, because they were an interracial couple, they were wed in Paris. Horn and Hayton didn't announce their nuptials for 3 years because they believed the public's ire would negatively impact their personal lives and careers. And sadly, they were correct. When the couple moved back to the States, Horn was threatened by both black and white individuals alike. She later stated, "When I look at Daddy Hayton, I don't think he's white. I think he's a man who's been kind to me." However, the negative opinions of the public and the press didn't affect the couple's relationship. Horn and Hayton eventually separated in the early 60s but never divorced. Their marriage ended upon Hayton's death in 1971. Judy Garland. Beginning when she was a teenager, the different addictions that would go on to both ruin and eventually take Garland's life were forced upon the actor. At the age of 13, she was given amphetamines in order to work the long filming hours the studio required. However, the studio realized the teenager still had to rest occasionally and gave her barbiturates to help her come down from the day's dosage of amphetamines. Garland once claimed, "They had us, herself and Mickey Rooney, working days and nights on end. They'd give us pills to keep us on our feet long after we were exhausted. Then they'd take us to the studio hospital and knock us out with sleeping pills. Mickey Rooney sprawled on one bed and me on another. Then after 4 hours, they'd wake us up and give us the pep pills so we could work 72 hours in a row." Garland was also encouraged to stay as slender as possible, which led her down a lifelong path of disordered eating habits. When her first film was released, an MGM executive let the then 14-year-old know she looked like a fat little pig with pigtails and placed her on the first of many restrictive diets. 4 years later, her first husband, David Rose, was appalled by her dangerously small dietary intake. At the time, Louis B. Mayer insisted Garland only consume black coffee, chicken soup, nearly 80 cigarettes per day, and pills every 4 hours to suppress her appetite. The actor was also sexually assaulted by a multitude of men, including the aforementioned Louis B. Mayer and the actors who portrayed Munchkins in The Wizard of Oz. In his posthumous memoir, Sid Luft, one of Garland's ex-husbands, wrote, "They, the Munchkin actors, would make Judy's life miserable on set by putting their hands under her dress. The men were 40 or more years old." On top of everything else she dealt with, Garland was another victim of forced abortions. As previously mentioned, when the actor was 18, she married David Rose, a songwriter who was 12 years her senior, without MGM's approval. She immediately became pregnant, and despite being married, the studio, and Garland's own mother, Ethel, feared that pregnancy would tarnish the star's innocent, childlike public image, and arranged for her to have an abortion. According to scandals of classic Hollywood author Anne Helen Peterson, Garland became pregnant 2 years later after an affair with fellow actor Tyrone Power. At that time, MGM's head of publicity, Howard Strickling, who arranged Lana Turner's abortion, then arranged for Garland to undergo another abortion. After a series of failed marriages, mental health struggles, and a lifelong drug and alcohol dependency, Garland passed away in 1969 at the age of 47 from an accidental barbiturate overdose.